Good morning. Nothing like getting over jet lag by taking the stage and getting really nervous, so it just like banishes all the fatigue. In June 2020, I got my dream job. I had started out professional life as an investment banker. In the mid-2000s, got into impact investing. And in June 2020, I was named the Chief Sustainability Officer at Deutsche Bank's asset manager, DWS. It was a position to set and drive the sustainability strategy for the firm, for the company, as well as for the almost $1 trillion of assets under management. And I thought, wow, what impact, what we can do here. So I got started, eager beaver, and just jumped in and just got to know my colleagues and just assess what's going on at the company, do a firm-wide assessment. And by the way, I found some really good things and have some really solid people. I also saw some bad things, and then unfortunately, I tripped over the very rotten things. So I put everything together in a report, and I let my boss, the CEO, know what's happening. We called for a formal board meeting because this was a serious issue, right? The really rotten thing was the fact the firm, DWS, was making false ESG claims publicly. ESG, environmental, social, and governance claims publicly to their shareholders, to investors, to the press. The company was saying stuff like this: ESG is at the heart of everything we do. It's in our corporate DNA. The majority of our assets under management are ESG aligned. Our company has world-class ESG risk assessment systems and risk management systems. They're sophisticated, they're above industry standards, and they utilize artificial intelligence. And they were pumping out all of these statements and quarterly reports and media updates, even in the annual report. Now, the reality internally, and this is where I blew the whistle, the reality internally was completely different. Number one, right, this statement, ESG is at the heart of everything we do. Most of the investment specialists, 800-odd portfolio managers and research people, most of them did not integrate environmental and social risk and opportunity factors into their investment process. In fact, more or less, when I walk down the hall as a chief sustainability officer, behind my back, they're flipping me off. Most people were not aligned to ESG at the company. Most of the assets under management were not aligned to an ESG strategy. So when the statement went out that 459 billion euros of assets are aligned to an ESG strategy, the majority, a group of us got together and said, hang on a second, where is this number coming from? It's not coming from us, the most senior ESG people. There was no tracking system. There was no database. Where is this number coming from? So we did a manual check, and the number was more like 120 billion. You had this massive delta between these two numbers, like, oops, we messed up. We got 300 billion wrong. You understand, this is just farcical. You cannot go out, even though, like the CEO said, but it's only ESG. It doesn't matter. Companies can't mislead, misrepresent, or missell on any strategy, even on ESG matters. The other thing was that the risk assessment system, it was called the ESG engine. The most commonly used word internally from the CEO's mouth to describe this sophisticated ESG risk assessment system was the word shit. It was so bad, there were calls to trash it. In fact, we were interviewing another company to come in, because it was urgent, to rebuild it. So you have this massive gap between what the company is saying publicly and what the company is actually doing. And of course, as a financial institution, this is a publicly listed company, right? It's running almost $1 trillion of assets. It's heavily regulated, and it has global presence. So these were issues where I said, look, we're already on probation with the US authorities. This is Deutsche Bank, they're always getting in trouble. We need to take this seriously, but it's all resolvable. We'll have to restate, we have to, obviously rebuild our risk assessment system. But it's, here's the action plan. It was really weird because for about 3 months, I just didn't get an answer. And these are urgent issues. And now the next annual report is coming out. And I had, I was one of the editors in the annual report. And so I had redlined the annual report to say misstatement, 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 and I edited it. And the next, I submitted it. My CEO is not giving me any direction. But at the last board meeting I attended, he just went silent on me, and in fact, started to turn against me. I had clocked at that board meeting, something is not right. Something bad is about to happen here. So I refused point blank to go out with the statements that they wanted, with their original misstatements. And I said point blank, no. I even think I actually banged the table and said, we need urgent change. We need to restate. The next thing as I'm waiting, for colleagues are calling me up, like, Des, how did it go? Right, because there was a lot of support. I had a lot of support within the company to make these changes. People knew it was a problem. And so it was about two-week process or so. We were waiting, and I just said to my colleagues, I don't know. I don't think it went well. The next thing you know, I had flown to New York. I was in New York, and because I was based in Frankfurt, headquarters for Deutsche Bank is Frankfurt. I'd flown to New York, and I woke up one day and I couldn't log in. And I get a message, an email from a Mr. Anus, and believe it or not, my circles will call him Mr. Asshole. So my CEO hired an external lawyer named Mr. Anus, and Mr. Anus wrote to me to say that DWS was going to issue my termination. They didn't even have the balls to fire me face-to-face. They got someone else to send a message. So there's no settlement agreement, there's no NDA, there's no severance, there's nothing. It's like, who did it and ran, right? They just got someone else to lob it over and ran away. So it's the weirdest thing. It's very disorienting. So I'm fired. The next thing you know, there's a Bloomberg article, and my CEO starts publicly disparaging me, questioning my business ethics. So this Bloomberg article comes out with the CEO, more or less saying she underperformed and she has questionable business ethics, so we got rid of her. So now I'm fired, I'm publicly discredited, and then they pull my work permit in Germany, and now I'm homeless. So at the age of 49, single mom of 3 kids, I had to go home. I had to return to my parents' house and temporarily move into the basement. 49. All my stuff is in Germany. What do you do? This was a grueling period. I didn't know what to do. I was thinking about blowing the whistle, maybe going to a media outlet. I was nervous. So I started reading books. I read, and articles about Tyler Schultz, who blew the whistle on Theranos, Gretchen Carlson, who went after that pig Roger Ailes at Fox, Susan Fowler, right, who went after the misogynistic culture at Uber. And I didn't know what to do. Maybe I should just get another job. But that the story was out there. No one wanted to hire me because they thought something, I had done something bad. But what really, the straw that broke the camel's back was that DWS started ratcheting up their propaganda in the press, talking about how advanced they are in ESG. They started increasing all of their greenwashing claims. They just went nuts with crazy hyperbole on exaggeration of what they were doing from a sustainable finance perspective. And that was it. That's when I thought, boy, that's when I decided I'm going to blow the whistle. of course, to clear my name, right? I want to clear my name. But also, someone needs to address pervasive greenwashing in this market, because I suspected that a lot of other companies were also coming out with false ESG claims or false green credentials. I knew it was pretty extreme where I was, but I had a feeling this is a massive industry-wide problem. Greenwashing is insidious for a number of reasons. Number one, right, you're lying to consumers and to investors and to communities. Number two, you're undermining the whole field of sustainability. And number three, you're providing the world with false hope that companies are taking action when they're not. We successfully mobilized trillions of dollars into ESG strategies. Where did that money go? Did it go to climate action? No, it went to make US tech companies even bigger. When you lift the hood on a lot of these ESG products, what are the top investments? Apple, Microsoft, NVIDIA, mega cap technology companies. So I felt there was a huge story in this and that this market needed reform. So it turns out I have a friend who's a journalist, and you might have heard of this newspaper he works at, the Wall Street Journal. And so Jared used to run it, and he's still an editor-at-large at the Journal. And I had dinner with him, and I said, look, this is what's happened, and I'd like to stay unemotional about this, just fact-based. Here are risk reports, email chains, my presentations, what was said internally at the company. Why don't you take a look at this? So the journalists at the Wall Street Journal did just that. They investigated, and they came out with their bombshell of an article in August 2021. And they actually broke the story that it looks like DWS is presenting a rosier sustainability picture than what they're actually doing in reality. 2 days later, I get a phone call, and I was driving in my car, and I could see area code 202, which is Washington, D.C., and I put the blinker on, I just pulled over, and I just knew it was the U.S. government. So the SEC, the FBI, and the Department of Justice called and said, we read the Wall Street Journal article, we've opened an investigation. Could we ask you to be a voluntary witness? So I did just that. A few weeks later, the German authorities called me up. The federal police, state prosecutors, and the financial watchdog in Germany. Now, this rolled out over some period of time, but to speed it up a little bit, this culminated in a police raid at Deutsche Bank's headquarters. 50 federal agents came in and confiscated whatever they could on suspicion of greenwashing. It's considered securities fraud, or if it's material, it's securities fraud. The CEO was ousted, and shortly thereafter, a lot of his crony friends and senior management also left. The US, the SEC, came out with a guilty verdict and levied the largest greenwashing fine in the US, $19 million for greenwashing at DWS. The company, now, well, that's a big number, but not only did their C-suite get eviscerated, the bad people were held to account, but the company, its share price dropped 14%. Market cap went down over €1 billion. It spent about 50 million euros in legal defense. ESG flows absolutely massively tanked. We can now put a very high price on greenwashing. This costs the company in the billions, more than €1 billion. Now, while it's always important that executives, if they do corrupt things, get held to account, what happens in the wider market? And I'm pleased to say that this story has been a massive wake-up call for financial institutions, at least, and I'm sure other companies. So it's led to tremendous reform, and regulators focusing on tackling greenwashing in the market. We could already see in Europe over $200 billion worth of investment products have been reclassified from a dark green category into a lighter green category. So companies are marking themselves, they're marking themselves to market and doing what was very badly needed, taking a step back and asking themselves, is there integrity to these, bold statements that we've made and these net zero pledges? Let's take a step back and ensure we're delivering on these pledges and statements, and if not, let's stop saying it. So at a minimum, I would say it has definitely led to better and more accurate and truthful corporate statements. I do believe that greenwashing in the financial industry has gone down. There's still a lot more work, don't get me wrong. But I do think that this story serves as a cautionary tale. I do think that there's now more public focus on saying, like, we got trapped in this ESG hype, but at the end of the day, did we, are emissions going down? Is the world a more just place? These were the original objectives of the whole movement. And what was realized is that ESG was used as a marketing tool by and large. It was almost hypocritical window dressing to sell more products and services, and that bubble has been burst. And folks know now that in today's world, if you make any of such claims, you have to have the data and evidence behind it, or else, the SEC is there. The FCA is very focused on also tackling greenwashing, and the Australian, financial watchdog as well, I understand, has called into question some statements from Vanguard. So, while this was, as a whistleblower, I'm not going to lie, this was a really, really difficult journey. And I get this question all the time, do I regret it? And it's like, not one bit, absolutely not one bit. I might regret taking the job. I should have done better diligence before joining the institution and working for the CEO. But it is so important to speak up. And it's taken a long time, right? It's when you blow the whistle, and I took the lead from folks, as I mentioned, these other whistleblowers, you need to reinvent yourself, right? I kissed my corporate career goodbye, and now I work as an advisor. I worked as an advisor to regulators, to financial institutions, to academia, to think tanks. So you have to have your eyes open when you're going on this journey. But, speaking up comes in so many different forms, and that's what's most important. We need to speak up to affect change. Whistleblowing or speaking up, it leads to so many societal safety efforts as well as societal progress. I started investment banking in 1994, and this might surprise some people. I think there's less of a speak-up culture today than there was in the bad 90s. I don't know if that's because of social media. Maybe we've become more litigious as a society and folks are fearful. Maybe there's this great book I read about the consulting companies hollowing out corporations, where big decisions are just go to the consultants, to ship this off to the consultants. Whatever the reason, I do feel, at least from my point of view, that there's less speaking up, and we need to change that. We've seen, when Tyler spoke up about Theranos, that was a public health and safety issue. This company, they had bogus blood tests. Can you imagine being misdiagnosed? How important it was for Tyler to stop Elizabeth Holmes and her partner? Or we look at Gretchen Carlson as an example, who stood up to Roger Ailes and got him ousted. And now what she's doing in the US, it's leading to reforms on silencing mechanisms in employment contracts. So I can't stress the need, and I'm so pleased to have the conversation, we're going to have, with on the panel coming up. how important it is to speak up, particularly on subjects like call for climate action and addressing insidious inequality globally. And we need to move to a place where whistleblowing isn't negative, it's not considered as a snitch. It's looked upon as folks, helping companies move to a better place, or individuals, trying to provide safeguards in a marketplace. And again, we need as much public support for whistleblowers and also, very importantly, government support. So thank you very much for listening, and now we're going to move to a panel.